Today, we have one of those very controversial conversations that I'm going to be injecting a lot of bias, a lot of overtone, undertone, different conflicting and contradicting narratives and perspectives. I do that a lot to kind of get the analytical mind to think about things in a very different and uncommon way. I think that's the true way of freedom when it comes to intellectually thinking or just looking things as a common person, looking things in a very common sense way by making it more complex than it may normally seem to be. So, first of all, like anything else, when we get into topics like this, that is my disclaimer. But we must get into the definition of the title in which I've derived to spark conversation, put it in chat, do it live here, however you guys want to go about it. So, anyway, without further ado, race. How does America define race? And I know that's small on your screens. Let me see if I can blow this up just a little bit for you guys. So it says the concept of race is separate from the concept of Hispanic origin. And I know in some forms, Hispanic people, Latin people may feel offended by that term, but I guess the way America has structured that word is that Hispanic people can claim to be any race that they want to be, right? You can be a white Argentinian. You can be an Afro-Mexican. You can be a white Puerto Rican. You can be an Afro-Puerto Rican, so to speak. And these are how they identify themselves in some ways or not, depending on the characteristics and also their complexions and some other variables culturally and as well as their physical makeup. But I won't dive deep into any one thing because I want there to be some sort of conscious thinking in order to look at this in very different ways. So white, again, this is the definition according to America. This is how they define race in America. And I want you to look at the verbiage here. White, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East or North Africa. Now, we know that Middle Eastern people have a sort of olive hue, light brown sort of complexion. And then North Africa, what we know is that the Arabs invaded North Africa and conquered North Africa. And now we know that as the Arab Emirates, okay? But previously from that, if you look in the southern parts of like Algeria, some of these states where people essentially look white, they have black Africans there, okay? Because they were the original people of that land before the Middle Easterners came in and invaded and changed the languages and things of that nature due to history. It includes people who indicate their race as white, who indicates their race as white. I want you to think about that. It includes people who indicate their race as white, but you have to be from one of these places. So if I'm a dark-skinned North Africa, can I consider myself white? That's what America is saying. Don't take my word for it. It says, or report responses such as German, Irish, English, Italian, Lebanese, and Egyptian. These categories also include groups such as Polish, French, Iranian, Slavic, Cajun. I mean, family, when you get into this, you see the breakdown. They're even naming Egyptians white. Even though the original Egyptians were Nubian, meaning black people, meaning dark-colored hue, meaning high in melanation. I'm just breaking down as I see it. As I told you before, I gave you guys my disclaimer in the beginning. If you didn't see it, go ahead and rewind the tape. Now let's look at the verbiage when they talk about black or African American. A person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. Why didn't they say original people of Africa? And look at the definition of white, family. It says in any of the original peoples of Europe. It didn't say in any of the original white people of Europe or the original white people of white racial groups in Europe. It did not state that, did it not? But when it came to black folk, It said origins in the black racial groups of Africa. It includes people who indicate their race as black or African American, or report responses such as African American, Jamaican, Haitian, Nigerian, Ethiopian, or Somalian. The category also includes such groups as Ghanaian, South African, Barbadian, Kenyan, Liberian, and Bahamian. So are you telling me that Elon Musk is black? No, he's African American. He can use that term, and that's why they put that term on that. But my question here when it comes to the black and white, why North Africans don't label themselves as African American? They can label themselves as white in America. That's a question. I'm just raising a question there. Now, we're going to skip past Native American. A lot of us are familiar with that. We see Asian, a person having origins in the original peoples of the Far East, Southeast Asia, or the Indian subcontinent, including, for example, India, China, Philippine Islands, Japan, Korea, or Vietnam. It includes who indicates their race as Asian Indian, Chinese, Filipino, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, and other Asians, okay? You go into the Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, we are familiar with that, and then 2 or more people when it comes to races. That is what they're referring to when they are talking about race. So, but here's something else to look at as well. When we look at race, isn't race a social construct that is used to classify people into groups based on their physical characteristics such as skin color, hair texture, and facial features? Because race is not a biological concept, is it not? And there is no scientific basis for dividing people into different races. And maybe that's why America has divided people into regions. And that's why America has probably divided people into regions and not based upon their physical characteristics. That because some white people may be characterized as black, labeled as black, and so on and so forth throughout the other races. But if you notice, Hispanics, once again, depending on their physical characteristics like skin color, ideology in some regards, they can label themselves as white or black. Because think about it. When you look at white supremacist groups, no matter where they are, like Enrique Ontario, he is a brown Hispanic person. He does not look white at all. But his ideology is white. His ideology is white supremacy. So can he then be deemed white? Well, according to the American census, yes, he can. Even on record, he records himself as white. He labels himself as white. He identifies as white. Something to look at. Let's move on to religion. Definition of religion according to the Merriam-Webster, a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices, the service and worship of God or the supernatural, commitment or devotion to religious faith or the observance of, okay, a cause of principle or system of beliefs held to with adore and faith. That's pretty much flat out plain and simple, okay? Here we go. Here we go with this family. You know how this goes. Give me a second here. Give me a second. I want to pop this one up when it comes to ideology because there's a lot to divulge within the definition of ideology. But as that queuing up, ideology is a set of beliefs and ideas. It's a set of beliefs and ideas that guide a person's or a people's thinking and behavior. Ideology. I want you really, really focus on ideology. Very, very important. Because as we get more into the broadcast, you're going to see how ideology plays a major role. It plays a major role. Because some people will choose their race. Some people would choose their religion. Some people would choose their ideology. Then some people try to choose all three. Is it possible? I'm raising the question here, family. Is it possible to choose your race, your religion, and your ideology? Well, let's see. Ideology is a set of beliefs that guides a person's or a people's thinking and behavior. Ideology can be political, social, or economic in nature, and they can be used to justify a wide range of actions. Let's look at it a different way. According to Merriam-Webster, ideas, characteristics of a person, group, or political party. Okay. A systematic body of concept, especially about human life or culture. A manner of the content of thinking, characteristic of an individual, group, or culture. Okay, so when we look at ideology, is race necessarily an ideology? Or is religion more so an ideology than race? I beg to differ. I believe that religion is more so an ideology than race. Because when we look at Jewish folk, we say the term Jewish as though it was a race, but it's a religion. But then you will talk to some Jewish people and they would say that it's an ethnic. So now it's an ethnic like a Hispanic folk that they can then choose their own race. They can then choose their ideology. Because when you look at this, anytime you say Jewish people, anytime you say Jewish, automatically majority of the people who are familiar with the term, they think of white people. They think of Anglo-Saxons. They think of a lighter complexion, someone who symbolized an Anglo-Saxon. Because not to disrespect Jewish people in any way, some of them look at themselves as Jewish people who are an ethnic, but what they're an ethnic of, what race do you actually belong to? So there's been many studies that show Jewish people on a very molecular and biological level that their DNA and RNA structure resemble those of Anglo-Saxon DNA and RNA structure. So some of you saying, well, you're just saying that Jewish people are white. I'm not saying that. You're saying it. The science says it. I don't say that. But again, all of this is going to play into the grand concept of the broadcast, because I really want to differentiate how people look at race, religion, and ideology. It's very important, because what drives some people? Some people are black empowerment. Their race drives them. They don't necessarily look at a person's religion. Oh, nah, man, you ain't Christian. I can't rock with you. Nah, man, you ain't Muslim. I can't dwell with the sinner. I can't. Then some people, when it comes to race, they encompass their ideology. Think about people who are in the black empowerment space, right? They are labeling themselves as black, like myself, with an ideology of empowerment. Then we look at white supremacists. They can collaborate, they join, they group together because of their white skin, and then the ideology of being supreme, of being over any and every other race because of their whiteness. See, you can actually exclude religion in some instances, but the question is this, and we're going to get into it. We're waking it up here, family. Because again, I don't want this is not a divisive conversation. This is more so of an intellectual conversation. I see you, Jermaine Anderson, brother, and I sent those shirts out to you, okay? But nonetheless, I want you guys to dive in this with me a little bit. Racism from the pulpit. Ladies and gentlemen, for 15 years, I've had the privilege of being pastor of a white Baptist church in this city. If we stand 100 years from now, it will still be a white church. I am a believer in separation of the races, and I am nonetheless a Christian. And the crowd applauded him. If you want to get in a fight with the one that started separation of the races, then you come face to face with God. The difference in color, the difference in our body, our minds, our life, our mission upon the face of this earth is God-given. How respected people of God can openly promote racist views with a question that would trouble many Southerners in the years that followed. Among them was a young woman growing up in East Texas in 1970. Caroline Renee DuPont. The girl's grandmother took her regularly to church, made her listen to sermons on the radio, and gave her a quarter for every Bible verse she memorized. But the grandmother believed just as deeply in the superiority of the white race. That's a form of indoctrination. If you remember these words from this text that was curated back in the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, then I give you a quarter. I digress. I asked her about that once, DuPont recalled, and she said, I just don't believe blacks should be treated the same as whites. Automatically, you already know that this person speaking is a white supremacist, right? They believe that white privilege and their white skin separates them to a hierarchy of a higher being of people, of a higher Homo sapien, so to speak, okay? So slavery and the Bible. You guys remember this guy, James Helen Thornwell, right? And this is what he said. As long as the African race, okay, foundational Black Americans, we have a lineage that dates back hundreds of thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of years to the continent of Africa. So he's speaking to us as well. It's in comparative degradation that coexists side by side with the white, Thornwell declared in a famous 1861 sermon. Bondage is its normal condition. Talking about African people, talking about black people. Thornwell was a slave owner, and in his public pronouncement, he told fellow Christians they need not feel guilty about enslaving other human beings. That's what he said. The relation of master and slave stands on the same foot with the other relations of life. It is not inconsistent with the will of God. It is not sinful to be racist. It's not sinful to have slaves. The Christian scriptures, Thornwell said, not only fail to condemn, they as distinctly sanction slavery as any other social condition of man. And believe you me, he must be 1,000% correct, because there's a lot of black folk that go around and state that the reason why black people are in mental bondage, the reason that black people were in physical bondage, is because things that occurred thousands years before you and I in generations past have even landed on the face of the earth. We're still paying for sins of our distant and thousand-year forefathers and foremothers. That's what they're stating. Family, I'm just reading the text as you see it right here today, okay? But let's move on. Let's go a little bit deeper with this, which a more significant figure that you guys may be familiar with. It states here, early on in the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, the first of the three autobiographies Douglass wrote over his lifetime, he recounts what happened, or perhaps more accurately, what didn't happen after his master, Thomas All, became a Christian believer at a Methodist camp meeting. Douglass had harbored the hope that All's conversion in August of 1832 may lead him to emancipate his slaves, or at least make him more kind and humane. Indeed, Douglass writes, if it had any effect on his character, it made him more cruel and hateful in all his ways. All was ostentatious about his piety, praying morning, noon, and night, participating in rivals, or more like rituals, and opening his home to traveling preachers. But he used his faith as a license to inflict pain and suffering upon his slaves. I have seen him tie up a lame or a black young woman and whoop her with a heavy cowskin upon her naked shoulders, causing the warm red blood to drip. And in justification of the bloody deed, he will quote this passage of scripture: he that knoweth his master will and doeth not shall be beaten with many stripes. Douglass writes, Douglass is so scornful about Christianity in his memoir that he felt a need to append an explanation clarifying that he was not an opponent of all religion. In fact, he argued, that what he had written about was not Christianity proper, and labeling it as such would be the boldest of all frauds. Douglas believed that the widest possibility difference existed between the slave-holding religion of this land and the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. So if you had to choose one, family, and I'm going to pose this question to you guys a couple of times during this broadcast, if you could only choose one, you could choose race, religion, or an ideology, what would it be? Race, religion, or an ideology? Let me continue. Yet, 125 years after Douglas' death, the American church is still struggling to eradicate the legacy of the slave-holding religion he loathed. Talking about Christianity. In a 2019 nationwide survey, 86% of white evangelical Protestants and 70% of both white mainland Protestants and white Catholics said that the Confederate flag is more a symbol of Southern pride than of racism. We don't need a history lesson on the Civil War. We don't need a history lesson on the Confederate soldiers in which the flag that they bore during those times, during that war, do we not? And what the true cause of that war was about. It wasn't about eradicating slavery when it came to the Union. It came to encompass the United States of America so Lincoln and the Union can combine the South, which was the powerhouse of the entire country because of the wealth of slavery. And the reason why it was a civil war, the North against the South, is because the South wanted to keep slavery. So when you say that 86% of these people and 70% of these people says that the Confederate flag is more of a symbol of Southern pride than of racism, that is 1,000% false. It says nearly 2/3 of white Christians overall said that killings of Black American men by the police are isolated incidents rather than part of a broader pattern of mistreatment. And more than 6 in 10 white Christians disagreed with the statement that generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for Blacks to work their way out of the lower class. So they don't even think that we can work our way out of the lower class. That's what it's stating here. And then I have a couple of more things before we really start getting to more commentary here, family, is this. Jews and whiteness. Interesting. Are Jews white? This in an excerpt from an article published by the Jewish Daily Forward. The article is written by a Jewish person and an activist and a writer. It says white passing. White passing. That's what it says when it comes to Jewish folk. It states implies the need to hide when someone is white passing. Let me blow that up. I know you guys can't see that. Let me blow that up. Let me see if I can get that very large. There we go. When someone is white passing, it often means that their white privilege is limited and they can be snatched away if their true ethnicity is discovered. For example, a white passing Latino person, okay, now we're talking about race and ideology, may be deported if their immigration status is revealed. White passing means the privilege is only extended in contexts in which a person is mistaken for white. A white passing Black person may get some privilege due to their appearance, but will still be subject to systematic economic disparities. But in this country, at this moment in time, those systematic punishments don't always apply to white Jews. So we have a Jewish person stating that they're white Jews. Okay, not me. I'm just reading the article. Okay, when people find out that they are Jewish, most systematic benefits of whiteness will not be taken away from the white Ashkenazi Jews who possesses themselves as someone discovered their Jewness. No doubt, prejudice and anti-Semitism may remain, but their lone race will stay the same, and the police won't be more likely to pull the trigger because of their whiteness. Whether you label yourself as Jewish, you label yourself as white, or you label yourself as a white Jew, most likely more people look at Jewish people as white. But even though in Israel, there's Jewish Ethiopians, there's Jewish black folk there, okay? But we see the discrimination that's happening over there again. But that's not the concentration of the video, family, because I know a lot of people won't come out the woodwork and start saying this, that, and yet. That's just a fact. The only thing you have to do is your own research. And it goes on to say that this is what being functionally white means, that someone can and is willing to operate in an American society as white without the fear that their ethnicity will be discovered. They can live in white neighborhoods. They have the safety of whiteness, go to white schools, marry white people, and have the economic privilege of whiteness. This is not to say that being Jewish isn't incredibly dangerous in this country, which it is in some regards. Anti-Semitic hate crimes make up the vast majority of all hate crimes, but at this point in time in America, anti-Semitism is not comparable to systematic racism of black folk. Interesting. So you know what this Jewish person just said? They said that Jewish folk can hide out in America and never reveal their Jewishness and perfectly live a safe life here in America being Jewish. As long as they don't divulge, as long as they don't expose, as long as they don't reveal that they're Jewish, that because of their whiteness, that they can hide out and be safe, versus someone who's black, and let's say you're black and Jewish. Doesn't matter. Systematic racism will still have you fear for your life from race soldiers with and without badges. Okay? It states here, all Jews will be a target of white supremacists, but many Jews may not ever experience racism. Can I throw a small disclaimer in here? Because white supremacists, they do their research and recon of where Jewish people live, where Jewish people worship. So they know Jewish neighborhoods. But if Jews did not congregate and live amongst themselves as they do to build their own economic power, which I believe in group economics, then Jewish folk, if they didn't do the traditional hairstyles that Jewish people do and wear the traditional religious garbs that they wear, they could essentially not be targeted by white supremacists if they never divulge their Jewness when it comes to white Jews themselves, as the article is stating. It says, but many Jews may not ever experience racism. This is because racism is an institutional poison based on skin color. Based on skin color and not religion. Based on skin color and not religion. Hopefully we're learning something here. It also says that on one's proximity to whiteness or one's distance from blackness. White supremacy is an extreme ideology that exerts the superiority of Western European Christian whiteness with violence and murder. It can spread like wildfire, but is rarely coded into every aspect of our lives. I can go on. This is a very powerful article called Jews and Whiteness. Jews and Whiteness. Because they started getting into the Ashkenazi Jews and things of that. Now, I'm just going to read this one thing for you guys in case you guys want a little more context and research for yourself. According to the numbers compiled in 2004 by the Institute for Jewish and Community Research, Jews who are African American, Black, Latino, Hispanic, Native American, mixed race, African South American, Middle Eastern, Caribbean, Asian, and Mizrahi make up 20% of Jews in the United States alone. The diversity is not always reflected. The diversity is not always reflected or embraced in our Jewish institutions. To explore how the stereotype equating Jewish identity with white Ashkenazi identity continues to permeate the American Jewish world. We invite you to complete the following checklist. I wonder if this author got ousted by the Jewish community. Because when you start having people to speak truth to power, like a Buddhist, okay? One of the 10 teachings of Buddha, one of the 10 Buddha teachings is truth to power. So I pose this question again. If you had to choose only one, you can only choose one, would it be your race, your religion, or your ideology? I'm just asking questions here. I'm just asking questions here, family. I'm trying to get a better understanding because when it comes to race, most people look at the physical characteristics, the social classification, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, and then when it comes to religion, we're most looking at a belief system, not a race system, but a belief system. When it comes to purpose, it provides a sense of community and belonging. Like when we look at all these different religions, we're talking about Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and then we start talking about ideology. It's a group of people or person share beliefs and ideas. Those who have guide thinking and behavior, right? Because when it comes to ideology, it also comes with a particular thinking and it also comes with a particular behavior, right? Like white supremacy, capitalism, socialism, and communism, right? All of these things make a difference. And this is coming from the Central Synagogue, Linda Gorin Social Justice and Discussion Series. So I want to get on religion a little bit more. Religion, believe it or not, family, pertains to a set of belief, practices, and values centered around the worship of a higher power or deity. Of a higher power or deity. Because anytime you start talking about religion and you reference that within the Black American culture and you question the religion, you get all sorts of people from all these different subgroups within Christianity of some sort, right? And I'm not pointing out any particular group, but whether it be Southern Baptists, Protestant, Hebrew Israelites, all of these are following some sort of doctrine that kind of derives or engulfs Christianity in some sort of way. Okay? But that's what we have to look at. It really centers around the worship of a higher power or deity, and it also encompasses the faith, the spirituality, and certain rituals. Okay, certain rituals like, a church program, a spirit dance, or, praise dance. We call them all different types of things. But we understand that guides the morale and ethnic principles of individuals and communities, especially the Black community. Because if I wonder if I took a tally or a poll and I had, let's say, 100,000 Black people, and I asked, say, you have to only choose one. Would you choose your race, your religion, or your ideology? I wonder what they would choose. And some of your question, well, what would you choose? I would choose an ideology. I would choose an ideology because my ideology is more powerful than my race because my ideology encompasses my race. That's what Black empowerment is all about. Then you're like, oh, well, you're contradicting yourself. I told you as my disclaimer in the beginning of this video. But it also has to do when it comes to religion, your experience in the continuous improvements that may find parallels in the way that religion institutions evolve and adapt over time to meet the changing needs of their followers. Very transformative, right? Adaptation. They try, because think about Christianity. If you took Christianity 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I'm just posing a question, YouTube. I'm just posing a question. So don't flag this video. I'm posing a question. If you took Christianity 20 years from now, if you took Christianity 30 years from now, and you asked all the deacons and deaconess and ushers, and you asked the reverends and the preachers and the bishops and the minister, you asked all of them, do you openly accept people from the LGBT community? What do you think majority of them would say if this was 20, 30 years ago? What do you think they would say, family? What do you think they would say? Because now we have created a new construct that has been very transformational and a transformation because of the social construct that if you do not accept a said group, you will be ostracized. You will be demonized. You will be you will essentially be separated. You will be persecuted, so to speak, if you speak out against a certain group. So now the Christian church, now the Christian Black church has been very transformative and adaptive to people's lifestyle that they once said 20, 30 years ago that was going against God. But now they use the term, we're all God's people. That's the question I pose. Now, when it comes to ideology, again, I'm going to go over ideology because we know it's a set of beliefs, doctrine, principles that forms on the basis of maybe a political, economic, or social system or social structure like white supremacy. Because the reason why that's important, family, that we understand ideology and kind of not disregarding race, okay, but definitely disregarding religion for this one point when it comes to ideology, because I did that one video when I talked about all the white supremacy groups that are in Mexico, that all the white supremacy groups that are in white or more so the brown, white, Hispanic culture. And I'm not saying that white Hispanics are white supremacists. I'm not saying that brown Hispanics are white supremacists. I'm saying there are some white and some brown Hispanics that are white supremacists, and they belong to said groups. And white supremacy is based on an ideology. So when you form the basis of a political, economic, or social system, it often includes a set of ideas and beliefs and thinking that has you to act then in your behavior. It guides individuals, it guides groups in their pursuit of specific goals and objectives. So when it comes to white supremacy, black folk and those who identify Jewish publicly are persecuted by the white supremacists, are killed by the white supremacists, are tortured by the white supremacists, are harassed by the white supremacists. That's what I had to say here today, family. And that's the question I pose to you guys. If you had to choose one, what would you choose? Would you choose race, religion, or would you choose an ideology? You guys have a great and wonderful one. Be one.